Hello again. Welcome to this week's Extra Point. Today we're going to be looking in Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 17. This message is entitled The Jesus You Can't Edit. So in verse 15, the Apostle Paul says, He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. May God grant blessings to the reading and hearing of his word. So, in one sentence, verse 16, Paul destroys every attempt to shrink Jesus down to something manageable. Consider again what Paul says. He is the image of the invisible God. All things were created through him and for him. And here's the truth. We don't get to define someone who creates us. You don't get to redefine someone who created you. You don't get to edit someone who sustains you. And you don't get to customize the King of the universe. And that is exactly what Paul is confronting. In the first century, people were already trying to reshape Jesus into something more comfortable. A wise teacher, a spiritual guide, a moral example, or a heavenly helper. Sound familiar? But Paul says, no, you don't get that option. Why? Because, he says, Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Not a reflection, not a representative, not a messenger, but God in flesh. And then Paul goes on to say, by him all things were created, and in him all things hold together. Meaning, you exist because of him, you breathe because of him. Every molecule in your body is held together by his command. Every sunrise, every heartbeat, every moment of your life is sustained by his power. So when people say, I like to think of Jesus as, or my Jesus would never, or I prefer to believe Jesus is, Paul steps in and says, you don't get to invent him because he invented you. And that's why Jesus, as we certainly tend to do, the Jesus of our imagination, can never save us. A Jesus we design is just a mirror of our desires. A Jesus we customize is just a projection of our preferences. And a Jesus we edit is just a spiritual version of ourselves. But the Jesus who actually is, the Jesus who created all things and holds all things together, the Jesus who rules over every power and authority, that Jesus can save you. And here's the good news. The real Jesus is better by far than anyone we try to create. He's stronger than your fears. He's wiser than your plans. He's holier than your desires. And he's more loving than your imagination could ever produce. So the question isn't, what version of Jesus do you prefer? The question is, will you bow to the Jesus who actually is? Because the King who made you is the only King who can redeem you. Until next time, remember that I am praying for you.